West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
So it was just a week ago, we covered Tennessee's Republican Attorney General seizing the private medical records of trans people in that state. Well, here's the lead in a breaking news story in the Tennessean newspaper tonight. Tennessee's Attorney General wants the state to be able to investigate and compel information on out-of-state abortions. These are your private medical records. They are taking them already from trans people in Tennessee. Now they want to take them from any Tennessee woman who has had an abortion in another state. In another state? Yeah, if you live in Tennessee and you need to get an abortion, well, Republicans have instituted an abortion ban in Tennessee. So you can't get one in Tennessee anymore. You will need to travel out of state. But Tennessee's Republican Attorney General now says he intends to effectively follow you out of state to get your medical records to see if you got an abortion somewhere else, even in a state where it's legal. That's the Tennessean tonight. And oh, look, it's also in Kentucky. Tonight in the Louisville Courier-Journal, the Kentucky Attorney General wants Kentuckians' out-of-state abortion records to be available to authorities. Oh, it's not just Tennessee, it's also Kentucky. Oh, and look, here it is in Arkansas, too, today in the Arkansas Times. Arkansas Attorney General wants to know about your out-of-state abortion. It's happening with the Republican Attorney General in Arkansas, too. Oh, and look, here tonight. Here it is in Georgia. Georgia Attorney General. And here it is in Mississippi. Mississippi's Attorney General. This is from Mississippi Today, a nonprofit news organization, which was actually first to break this story with this headline: Mississippi's Attorney General wants to make info on out-of-state abortions available to Mississippi authorities. Mississippi has banned abortion. There is no abortion clinic left in Mississippi. So if you live in Mississippi and you need to get an abortion, you will need to figure out how to get yourself out of Mississippi and into a state where you can legally get one. But the Republicans in state government in Mississippi say they will effectively follow you out of the state. By virtue of the fact that you are a Mississippi resident, sorry, they now claim the right to seize your medical records from a clinic in New York or in Illinois or wherever else you go. They claim the right to follow you there and take your private medical records from there for their own law enforcement purposes. And I just showed you headlines from Mississippi, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Georgia, but it is actually 19 different states where Republican officials are going for this now. 19 Republican attorney generals in 19 states have signed on to a letter to the Biden administration saying they want the right to go after women's private medical records anywhere in the country, including all the states where abortion is legal. They want to follow their residents all over the country to see if that woman might be getting an abortion or some other kind of reproductive care anywhere. They want the records, and they claim the right to go get them. Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah. Republican attorneys general in all of those states have sent this letter to the Biden administration about their right, as they see it, to get your private medical records. And they mean it for women getting an abortion, or potentially fertility treatment, or any kind of reproductive care, potentially contraception. And yes, also gender-affirming care of any kind. They claim the right to go take your private medical records to see what you're up to with that kind of care, no matter where you have gone to get it. How can you get away from something like this? I mean, if this is what they say they want to do, and it is, how do you get away from it? The reason they've written to the Biden administration saying they claim this right is because the Biden administration says they should not have the right to do this. The Biden administration is trying to assert federally that attorneys general from states where abortion is banned can't follow their residents to other states to see if they're getting banned care from someplace where it's legal. Beyond those efforts to protect this at the federal level from the Biden administration, you've also started to see blue states, places like New York and Washington State, that have also passed state laws saying that nobody should be able to get private medical records like this. Just because you've banned abortion in your state doesn't mean you can effectively enforce it in mine. But here's 19 Republican states, 19 Republican state attorney generals saying they're going for it. And maybe they already are. When reporter Joe Sonka from the Louisville Courier-Journal today asked the Kentucky Attorney General's office if they have already pursued private medical records from Kentucky women who've had medical treatment in other states, the Attorney General's office didn't give Joe Sonka an answer. He says he has still not heard back from the Attorney General's office about this, which leaves open the possibility that maybe they are already doing this. Maybe they are already trying or getting these medical records. They used to say that the Republican Party was the party of limited government. This is a lot of things, but this is not that. Joining us now is Minnie Timuraju. She's president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. Ms. Timuraju, it's really great to see you. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with this letter from these 19 Republican attorneys general. They're writing to the Biden administration. Why? Why have they said that? Why have they taken this on as a matter that they need to take up with the federal government?
You know, the Republican AGs have been increasingly extremist. They're some of the most egregious offenders of attacks of our fundamental freedoms, from the freedom to vote to reproductive freedom. It's not shocking that as they're losing the public opinion war on abortion, they're pivoting and trying to conflate gender-affirming care attacks with abortion care. You know, we know that the opponents for reproductive freedom and abortion access are the same as the opponents of gender-affirming care and the LGBTQ plus and trans communities. We know this because we know where the dark money is coming from. We know who the organizers are behind this. There's model legislation. This all kind of started with SB 8 in Texas, actually, my home state, which established this vigilante mechanism, right? And really encouraged citizens of the state to spy and report Texans who left the state to have abortions. And when you have organized entities with extremist organizations like, you know, Heritage Society, Christian, Right to Life, they are literally disseminating model legislation and tactics within the AGs and between the legislatures. So it's not shocking. Our sense of this is they're losing the public opinion war on abortion. They are desperate to win back power. And in Mississippi, we know we have folks, the AG is currently up for re-election, and she's going to be in a tough race. So this is them fear-mongering against some of the most vulnerable Americans to try to score points in their increasingly desperate base.
So we started covering this story when we learned about it in Tennessee, when families in Tennessee got notified by Vanderbilt University Medical Center that, sort of much to their chagrin, the medical center felt compelled to hand over people's medical records when the Attorney General demanded them. Families didn't find out that the medical records had actually gone to the AG's office until months after they'd already been handed over, which I think was very distressing to a lot of these families. But it raises very practical questions immediately. One is, what can medical providers do to protect the privacy of their patients, both in Republican-controlled states where there may be bans on the kinds of healthcare that we're talking about here, but also in blue states where these things are legal and people should be able to obtain this kind of medical care without without government intrusion. But what can people themselves do to try to protect themselves if attorneys general in all of these states, 19 states, are saying they think that people's private medical information like this is fair game?
So I think you alluded to it before. The Biden administration, HHS, proposed this rule in response to an active, public comment period, but also the White House, led by Vice President Harris and the Gender Policy Council, has done 40 plus meetings with abortion providers, activists, patients in tough states like Idaho and Missouri. They've been soliciting feedback from legislators, AGs. They've known for a long time that this is what states were trying to do. The reporting you gave, they've been tracking this, which is also why the U.S. Senate last year, Catherine Cortez Masto, led by Catherine Cortez Masto, also tried to pass legislation that would protect providers and patients from crossing state lines. Now, what can folks do in the states where these AGs are threatening their bodily autonomy and their freedom? They have to, frankly, the best choice is to fight back at the ballot box. We have to get more activist about removing extremist AGs. Some of the most forward-thinking attorneys general are now the governors in states that are doing the most advanced work on reproductive care. You're talking about, you're going to have Governor Shapiro on. He's a former AG. Maura Healey, former AG. I hate to make it political, but it is political. We have to organize reproductive freedom voters. To your point earlier in the show, Rachel, reproductive freedom voters have to become supporters of the broad range of freedoms for everybody, for our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. The other course of action folks can take is to challenge these bills and these laws in the courts. And a lot of our colleagues at ACLU, Center for Reproductive Rights, are working on litigation.
Minnie Timuraju is president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. Ms. Timuraju, thanks very much for making time this evening. This is a story that I think is going to get more attention in days ahead. It's helpful to have you here.
Thank you.
All right. I should say when the Biden administration announced this rule to try to prevent, effectively, Republican attorneys general in Republican-controlled states from chasing their residents around the state, from chasing their residents around the country, going after their medical records, NARAL Pro-Choice America put out a statement saying, your conversations with your doctor and your decisions about reproductive health care, including abortion care, are your own business, no one else's. And I remember when they put out that statement at the time, I remember thinking at the time, like, yes, clearly that's the obvious bottom line from which we all proceed here. It's not the obvious bottom line from which at least 19 Republican states are proceeding now. It's incredible that this is contested ground, but boy, is it.
It is Tuesday, the 18th of July of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special, daily special Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. The Spanish kind, too. It's just they make more of the Hungarian kind. At least they did for a while there. I think they still do. The Spanish has increased their production, but I don't think it'll be able to match the Hungarian because that's just the law of the land. How are you? It's Target Letter Tuesdays. Oh, my. Yes. You know, sometimes you wake up and you're putzing around. Next thing you know, good things are happening. And it was to be expected? I don't know. Now, one thing that we need to remember is that it is Trump who let us know about the target letter, not Jack Smith. But at his rallies, he's going to tell his people that Jack Smith and the government are out to get him. And look how they leaked this. How dare they? He's already whining on his Truth Social. Is that what it is? You know, they take the American flag. They take the word truth even. And they twist it around to mean something entirely different than what we had been accustomed to, well, forever. And that's what Nazis do. Oh, did I go there? I've been going there for a long time. And this guy's just proving it out. All right. So, sedition against the United States of America, is that how we can basically sum up the charges in this target letter? I think that's about what it is. He calls these charges election interference, when actually it's him interfering with an election and committing sedition against the United States of America. Now, I would also venture to proffer an opinion. You get that, proffer? That there is an ongoing insurgency at the very moment that we speak. Because that's what an insurgency is. Now, once again, a reminder, a coup moves into an insurgency when elected officials begin to move the machinations of government to further the coup. Therefore, now it is now an insurgency. And that's where we've been at for quite a while. Okay. Now Trump goes to his rallies and says, they're indicting you. Because that's how he works, you know. Get the black and brown shirts all fired up and get out there and do their job. Crystal knocked every night of the week. Oh, yeah. USA. In fact, you don't try that in a small town. Really? Yeah, Dean. What a coward that guy is. You know, he ran. He was in the Vegas shooting. He was on stage, and he ran. Now, my brother was in the kill zone. And, you know, people didn't want to stay there either, so let's be clear. But I love these chicken hawks. They're really... And also, this guy doesn't come from a small town. He comes from a town of, 150,000 people? That's not small. He might think it is. Jeez, because he's seen the big city. And where he comes from might seem like a small town in comparison. I don't know. But I can tell you about small towns. Oh, yeah. So, Trump wants to fire up those people from the small town. Don't try it in a small town. They're indicting you. All right. Well, perilous times, I would suppose. We're supposed to have like a big family gathering where there's going to be some, shall we say, people of the MAGA persuasion attending. Because there's kids involved and we're not supposed to, disrupt the kids' lives because there's a party of Nazis that want to kill the rest of us. So why don't we party with them? Oh, they're family. Oh, yeah, that'll help. I don't know anymore. Used to say, oh, yeah, we can get along with people who have, like, different political persuasions, but I don't know. Do you sit down with serial killers just because they're family? What if they start turning? Yeah, can you imagine the lady married to Bundy? Jeez. Oh, I don't know. Maybe she felt safe, at least taking his aggressions on others. Maybe. And of course, as you know, because you've experienced this before too, there may be some ground rules that will be established. And that is, we won't be talking about politics, keep it down and all that stuff. And who will break that rule every single time? And then once you open your mouth, you'll be pointed out that, oh, you don't know how to keep civil. After they've been ranting and raving and threatening your life with, I'm going to kick your ass. How many times have I heard that before? Let's just put it this way. Many have threatened. I don't know. None have really succeeded. That's not to say I haven't been clocked a couple of times, but I came too quick. Yeah, I made this rule. If you're knocked out on your feet, you kind of want to wake up before you get hit again. That's what, I don't know. Some people go, I'm just going to let him hit me again. I don't know. I want to try to keep from getting hit again. Wake up. Brain does weird things in moments of stress. So I don't know why we're getting to that point. We don't want to talk about that kind of BS, but I don't know. It could get scary, or maybe we're just living in a date that will live in infamy, and let's hope so. Yeah. Turn the page in America. Finally, a mobster got to the presidency of the United States of America, and he acted exactly what we thought he would act like, a mobster. He was going to use the presidency as a shield for his crimes. The guy's stealing artifacts from Israel. I think that's going to get him a lot more trouble than, a few nuclear secrets he's selling to the Sauds. I don't know. Too much consonants? Maybe. That was a clearing breath. I'm trying to clear not only my, hypertension. Is that what it is? No, it's not that. But just my spirit and soul. Because we do have a curated show for you, except, sometimes you stick your head up out of the bubble and next thing you know, or in this instance, it happened before I actually put my head into the bubble, but pretty much had things set in place last night just to make it easier in the morning. What do we have in store for you here in this fabulous salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? And you are in the Bistro Cafe part, of course, and we do have the chef's table out back. Do things a little bit differently. We do like a little sweet amuse-bouche with an international flavor at the end rather than at the beginning. It's just how we do it. What do we have in store for you in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Yeah, as Rachel pointed out, 19 Republican state attorneys general demanded their law enforcement be allowed to seize out-of-state abortion medical records. They want to come to a state wherever you are at and take the medical records. And what's going to stop them from taking others? Already in California, for instance, for some reason, law enforcement there said, oh, yeah, we'll share when cars with license plates from your state come into our state. Sure, no problem. All right. Wow. Give a cop an inch, and next thing you know, they're goose-stepping down Main Street, too. What's in store as we continue in the Bistro Cafe? Abortion in Iowa is legal again for now. Yeah, I got a judge saying stop. Several civil rights groups filed a federal lawsuit challenging Florida's new immigration law. And a gag order has been issued ahead of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's impeachment trial after inflammatory remarks. Oh, my. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Britain officially joined an Asia-Pacific trade group that includes Japan and 10 other nations. I had no idea they were in the Pacific still. They must be. And Russia halted a breakthrough wartime deal that allowed grain to flow from Ukraine to countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who has returned from Netroots Nation 23, and it looks like we'll be attending Baltimore for Netroots Nation 24, so we'll look forward to that as well. So thank you, Kelly, for everything that you do. If you would now, out there in radio listening land, look across the page, our homepage at netrootsradio.com, near the bottom, to the left, just down a skosh, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really helps us. It's the morning. I'm still figuring it out. And yes, that would really help us pay our bills and all the other attendant costs running this powerhouse of resistance. So if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could send those funds to us once a month, we're able to pool those and put a big dent in all of those bills. So thank you for your generosity, and a pre-thanks to those of you who may consider doing so and being so generous in the future. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those and a lot more. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. So if you followed me at Justice Putnam on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you would be able to find those show notes and links really quick. And that's where the real reportage is. Because we're fully transparent here, even though we might be, playing around. But it's all for a good cause. That's right. You know what that is. Anyway, follow me on those platforms. You can also follow the show, such as the Twitter feed is at Cookbook West on Twitter. And do please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube, Deezer. Can I say iTunes? It's going to be iTunes. I got to figure out, they should be coming on Apple Podcasts, but I got to look, because on the Spreaker media page, I need to, social media page, it looks like I haven't quite completed the application. Oops. Anyway, find us wherever podcasts can be found, and they're everywhere. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Hannah Fingerhut from the Associated Press. An Iowa judge yesterday, Monday, temporarily blocked the state's new ban on most abortions after about 6 weeks of pregnancy, just days after Governor Kim Reynolds signed the measure into law. That means abortion is once again legal in Iowa up to 20 weeks of pregnancy, while the courts assess the new law's constitutionality. The new law prohibits almost all abortion once cardiac activity can be detected, which is usually around 6 weeks of pregnancy and before many women know they are pregnant. And I just have to take exception. There is no fetal heart activity at 6 weeks. Please. pulsating cells are not a heart. Why do any of us have to continue with this charade? Reynolds swiftly put out a statement underscoring her intention to fight the issue all the way to the Supreme Court. And that was a feature, not a bug. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Several civil rights groups filed a federal lawsuit yesterday, Monday, challenging Florida's new immigration law. The Southern Poverty Law Center, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU of Florida, Americans for Immigrant Justice, and the American Immigration Council filed the lawsuit in Miami federal court against Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Attorney General Ashley Moody, and statewide prosecutor Nicholas B. Cox on behalf of the Farm Worker Association of Florida and others, according to court records. The legislation that DeSantis signed into law in May bolsters his migrant relocation program and limits social services for immigrants lacking permanent legal status. It also expands requirements for businesses with more than 25 staffers to use E-Verify, a federal system that determines if employees can legally work in the U.S. Another provision requires hospitals that accept Medicaid to include a citizenship question on intake forms. The lawsuit specifically focuses on provisions that criminalize the transportation of individuals into Florida who may have entered the country unlawfully and have not been inspected by the federal government since. The complaint states it is unconstitutional for a state to unilaterally regulate federal immigration and subject people to criminal punishment without fair notice. It also asserts Florida's use of the term inspection is incoherent and unconstitutionally vague. The governor's office did not immediately respond to a message. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Several civil rights groups filed a federal lawsuit yesterday, Monday, challenging Florida's new immigration law. The Southern Poverty Law Center, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU of Florida, Americans for Immigrant Justice, and the American Immigration Council filed the lawsuit in Miami federal court against Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Attorney General Ashley Moody, and statewide prosecutor Nicholas B. Cox on behalf of the Farm Worker Association of Florida and others, according to court records. The legislation that DeSantis signed into law in May bolsters his migrant relocation program and limits social services for immigrants lacking permanent legal status. It also expands requirements for businesses with more than 25 staffers to use E-Verify, a federal system that determines if employees can legally work in the U.S. Another provision requires hospitals that accept Medicaid to include a citizenship question on intake forms. The lawsuit specifically focuses on provisions that criminalize the transportation of individuals into Florida who may have entered the country unlawfully and have not been inspected by the federal government since. The complaint states it is unconstitutional for a state to unilaterally regulate federal immigration and subject people to criminal punishment without fair notice. It also asserts Florida's use of the term inspection is incoherent and unconstitutionally vague. The governor's office did not immediately respond to a message seeking comment about the lawsuit. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A top Texas Republican who will oversee Attorney General Ken Paxton's impeachment trial issued a sweeping gag order yesterday, Monday, that scolded inflammatory public comments made by lawyers on both sides ahead of the historic September proceedings. The order by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, the powerful leader of the state Senate, underscored how Paxton's fight for his political survival over accusations of abuse of office has drawn some of Texas' brashest and highest-profile legal figures. The impact was swift. Houston attorney Tony Busby, Paxton's lead attorney, canceled a news conference scheduled for today after the order was issued. The news conference had been announced in a statement that accused a kangaroo court in the Texas House of driving the impeachment. The court finds that individuals involved in the trial of impeachment will likely continue to make public prejudicial and inflammatory statements unless this order is issued, Patrick wrote. State senators who will serve as Paxton's jury once this trial begins September 5th were already barred from speaking publicly about the case under rules issued earlier this summer. But Patrick, a former Houston broadcaster and conservative talk radio host who will serve as the trial's presiding officer, is now reining in attorneys on both sides. The trial has no shortage of Texas legal star power. On one side is Busby, whose past clients include former Texas Governor Rick Perry and women who accused NFL quarterback Deshaun Watson of sexual harassment and assault. On the other side is Dick DeGuerin and Rusty Hardin, who will present the case to impeach Paxton and combined have represented a long roster of celebrities and famous figures. Paxton, who has been under FBI investigation for years over accusations by members of his own staff that he used his office to help a donor. He was separately indicted on securities fraud charges in 2015 and inexplicably has yet to stand trial. Well, inexplicable indeed. All right, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. From a very young age, we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, many Americans are not getting the message. Dr. Seung-Hee Lee Kwon is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of eating enough fruits and vegetables. Welcome to the show, Seung-Hee.
Thank you for having me.
Seung-Hee, what is the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
The federal guidelines recommend that adults consume at least 1.5 cups to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables each day. This is for adults who get less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. Adults who are more physically active need more calories and thus should be eating more fruits and vegetables. 1 cup is about 12 strawberries or 1 large tomato.
How many people consume the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
We found that very few adults are getting enough fruits and vegetables. Just 12% are eating the recommended amount of fruits, and less than 1 in 10 eat enough vegetables. And consumption is lower among men, young adults, and adults living in poverty.
Why is eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables so important?
Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help with 3 things. 1, it can reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and deaths, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and even obesity. It can also add important nutrients that are commonly missing in Americans' diet. And it can help with weight management if adults consume fruits and vegetables instead of other calorie-dense foods.
How can we meet the recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables?
Try to fill half of your plate with fruits or vegetables at each meal or every eating occasion. Making fruits and vegetables the focal point of your meal will help you meet your recommendations. For example, recent studies have shown that adults get most of their fruit during breakfast and snacks. So you can try adding berries to your morning oatmeal or grab a piece of fresh fruit as an afternoon snack. For vegetables, most adults eat them at dinner, so try adding more into your lunch by adding a side salad or packing a snack of baby carrots or grape tomatoes.
Are canned or frozen products just as good as fresh?
All forms of fruits and vegetables count towards meeting the recommendations. For the most health benefits, make sure that the fruits and vegetables you consume have a limited amount of salt, butter, sugar, or creamy sauces. When selecting canned fruits, choose the ones with lowest sugars. And for canned or frozen vegetables, choose those lower in sodium.
Where can listeners get more information about eating a healthy diet?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/nutrition or choosemyplate.gov.
Thanks, Seung-Hee. I've been talking today with Seung-Hee Lee Kwon about the importance of eating a healthy diet. Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death and add important nutrients to your diet. Make sure you're eating enough. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes, their age, the way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table?
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Bank Strong, and the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
A book goes home. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The book's author was James Clerk Maxwell, not exactly a household name. And the book, titled An Elementary Treatise on Electricity, well, never exactly topped a bestseller list. Not surprising, since the book is, as the New York Times story put it, crammed with technical jargon and mathematical equations. The book was published in 1881, and the New Bedford, Massachusetts Public Library acquired a copy in 1882. So far, so good. But after being checked out in 1905, it wasn't returned. Fast forward 118 years to May 2023, when the Massachusetts Library received a note from the rare books curator at the West Virginia University Library that read, "We have recently received a donation that included a book from your library. Would you like it returned?" The answer was yes, and it was. And yes, we were concerned about late fees too. They were a penny a day in 1905 when the book was checked out, so they could have been over $400. Fortunately, decades ago, late fees were capped at $2. This is indeed a feel-good story. What we can feel even better about is a 2023 news story about a library that, for a change, isn't about censors trying to pull a book off the shelf, but rather about a book going home. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That Friday, thousands of workers in the Chicago stockyards walked off the job. A serious union organizing drive had been underway in the yards since June. One of the organizers of the butchers was John Kikulski. John declared it would be a campaign that included workers who were Polish, Irish, Lithuanian, and in fact, every race, color, creed, and nationality. This was an important pledge because earlier unionization efforts had failed to unite the workforce and had often excluded black workers. Yet the years of racial barriers to unionize proved hard to break down. While 90% of the white workers joined the union, black recruitment lagged behind. Tensions between the newly arriving Eastern European workers and more established white workers also simmered. Despite these setbacks, the stockyard owners were alarmed by the success of the union drive. They sent in 300 mounted policemen to disrupt union meetings and monitor the workers' movements. Angered at the police presence, 10,000 workers walked off the job. They returned to work on Monday, but began organizing for a strike. On July 26th, the workers issued their demands to management for better pay and safer working conditions. The next day would be one of the most infamous days in Chicago history. A group of white Chicagoans stoned and killed a black boy who was swimming and had accidentally drifted into a whites-only part of Lake Michigan. For the next week, a race riot engulfed the neighborhoods surrounding the stockyards. 1,000 black families lost their homes to arson. 23 black and 15 white residents were killed. Any hope of racial unity had been crushed, and as a result, the strike failed. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low to mid-90s. Sunny throughout the day with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the low 60s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. And then sunny and hot tomorrow with highs in the upper 90s. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen remains the predominant pollen, hurting everybody that has grass pollen allergies. It is rated high here in our town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 19 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains very high at level 9, so take care if you have those numbers. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.04 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 72%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. And that's why it's the Weather Underground. London is 72 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 84 and sunny. Rome is a blistering 103 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, with a heat advisory, I would expect. Kyiv is 81 degrees and fair. Kabul is 80 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 85 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 85 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 48 and clear. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 84 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Nick Perry of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Britain officially joined an Asia-Pacific trade group that includes Japan and 10 other nations during a meeting in New Zealand on Sunday. The trade bloc covers more than 500 million people and 15% of the world's economy. For Britain, it represents the largest trade deal it has struck since leaving the European Union more than 3 years ago. Britain first announced in March it had reached an agreement to join the bloc, which was created in 2018 after more than 2 years of negotiations. It is the first new member to join the bloc, called the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP. It also includes New Zealand, Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Malaysia, Mexico, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam. The deal comes as Britain pursues greater engagement with the Indo-Pacific. Critics say the deal is insignificant compared to Britain's trade with its neighbors in the 27-nation EU. Since leaving the EU, Britain has also signed separate trade deals with Australia and New Zealand.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Courtney Bonnell of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Russia halted a breakthrough wartime deal that allowed grain to flow from Ukraine to countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, where hunger is a growing threat and high food prices have pushed more people into poverty. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the Black Sea Grain Initiative would be suspended until demands to get Russian food and fertilizer to the world are met. An attack Monday on a bridge connecting the Crimean Peninsula to Russia was not a factor in the decision, he said. When the part of the Black Sea deal related to Russia is implemented, Russia will immediately return to the implementation of the deal, Peskov said. Russian representatives at the Operations Center for the initiative were more definitive, calling the decision a termination, according to a note obtained by the Associated Press. Russia has complained that restrictions on shipping and insurance have hampered its agricultural exports, but it has shipped record amounts of wheat since last year. The suspension marks the end of an accord that the UN and Turkey brokered last summer to allow shipments of food from the Black Sea region after Russia's invasion of its neighbor worsened a global food crisis. The initiative is credited with helping reduce soaring prices of wheat, vegetable oil, and other global food commodities. Ukraine and Russia are both major global suppliers of wheat, barley, sunflower, oil, and other food that developing nations rely on. Some analysts don't expect more than a temporary bump in food staples traded on global markets because countries such as Russia and Brazil have ratcheted up wheat and corn exports. But food insecurity worldwide and prices at local stores and markets have risen as developing countries struggle with climate change, conflict, and economic crises. Finding suppliers outside Ukraine that are farther away also could raise costs, analysts say. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.